Greetings! It is I, Tentus Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on anime series, where I review them for you, and then give you some suggestions on how you can use them in your Big Eyes Small Mouth, your BESM games. Of course, as I've always said, these do apply to other role-playing game systems. You're just going to have to adapt them yourself. But why don't we dive into it? I have two more, this time from this current season, and I do have two in the back half. One that's going to be a suggestion from one of you folks out there. Primarily it's a manga, but it does have an anime in the works and an OVA that's recently out, so I thought it was still appropriate. And one that is from back in 2014, since we kind of moved off into there when it came with animes. But let us dive into the two from this season, Attack on Titan Season 2 and Tsugumomo. But let's talk about Attack on Titan Season 2. Because technically this is the second season of the Attack on Titan. Alright, so this one, it's set in a world where 100 years ago, giant humanoids called Titans basically arrived and pretty much almost wiped out humanity. They devoured them. Humanity, the last remnants of humanity, decided to survive by hiding behind massive walls to keep them out. And this worked for some time, until about 5 years ago, where one of the walled-in sections was basically breached by this colossal titan. About 60 meters tall, taller than any other titan that was out there. It broke down the wall and let the titans in. Eren and his group of friends basically managed to survive, but Eren's mother was effectively devoured, eaten, in front of him. He was kind of scarred, but managed to survive, and then now, 5 years in the future, him and his friends are joining portion of the military, the Survey Corps, which tends to be the ones that go out and kill titans. So you can see where the kind of plot line opens up here, that Eren's kind of on a revenge kick. As for the genres, it's a dark fantasy. People die. A lot. Very often. A lot of characters die. Characters that you might grow attached to. And it's set in this sort of interesting world where there's bits of technology, but also not. You know, it's sort of like this renaissance, almost, you seem, for the normal society, but interesting level of technology overall. And it's, of course, a post-apocalyptic, in a way, because even though this is sort of an alternate world, it is a world that probably was originally much like our own before the Titans overran it. And there seems to be hints that there was once more civilization closer to our own. There's also action. I definitely would call this a lot of action. They battle the Titans, go through some training, things like that, that lead them into a lot of action. Now, here's where my controversy for this one is. I rated it a 4. The reason? I'm not as big a fan of dark fantasy. This is a very good series. And it did have a barrier for me entering into it, because I saw the first episode and I was like, I don't want to be depressed. And so I waited quite a long time before I finished the first season. I've been keeping up with the second season, of course, but because of that barrier. Dark fantasy oftentimes has a barrier of a lot of death and things like that. And there's other animes that have a lot of death to them, which, unfortunately, a lot of main character death tends to shy me away from it. Though excellent writing and stuff, and great characters can keep me in with it. So, even though everybody dies horribly, and oftentimes horribly right there in front of everyone kind of thing, I can keep with it if it's good, and that's still only why I rated it a 4. Now let's talk about using it in a BESM game. I'd recommend 300 points. You're going to make your characters a team of people in the Survey Corps. Effectively, that's the best way they're going to describe it. They're going to go on missions for the Survey Corps, fight Titans, try to reclaim areas of the wall, try to keep territories safe. If you want to dive into some of the special Titans and the adventures around them, that's fine too. If you're going to use something like the special Titans, I would recommend having either Eren himself as an NPC, or a character like him if you want to adapt your own storylines completely different from the anime/manga, just set in the same kind of universe. That's also fine too. But effectively then, I would not recommend having a player have that one sort of ability. And this is definitely one that you should be prepared for character deaths and easily be able to replace it with characters coming into the basically unit they are should someone die horribly. Because they probably will at some point in time. It's the kind of game that you're going to have to live with. It's a character death sort of game. But it should be enjoyable if you like that kind of thing. It's an interesting world, definitely. So there you go. But let's talk about now Tsugumomo. So Tsugumomo, we focus on Kazuya, a young boy who his only keepsake of his mother is this obi sash that he has, that he always carries around with him. And one day he effectively gets attacked by something supernatural, and the sash comes alive as its own form of a kind of yokai. This girl called Kirika. So now he has to deal with her attempting to live in his room, deal with other supernatural threats that are sort of around him, but then also deal with the fact he's got a childhood friend, a sister who tries to be a little too close, other characters that have a sort of interest in with him. So he's got a whole bunch of girls around him that all have an interest in him, a little too much to his chagrin because he's kind of an easily embarrassed kind of guy, and kind of quiet. But then also, there's also these levels of various kind of supernatural things going on around him because of everything that started here, and he has to sort of deal with those and ally with Kirika to oftentimes help protect himself or protect those around him from what's going on. Now the genres, I would call these three more than anything else. There can be little bits of action, but I wouldn't call it action. It's a romantic comedy. He has relationships with a bunch of people, and comedic things happen from these said relationships that end up very silly things. So of course, romantic comedy. It's a supernatural. He's got a bunch of yokai and other supernatural things going on around him, so of course, definitely supernatural, and it's a harem. As much as, like, you would want to maybe call it's got a little bit of action, yeah, it's more harem than action. It's more the other genres than action. So harem. He has a bunch of girls around him who all kind of like him and all have relationships with him in some way. It's the textbook definition of a harem. It's not as hit you in the face as far as I've seen so far in the series, but then again, you know. Now I rate this one a 3. It's a pretty decent series. I don't mind the harem elements at it, too. I like a little bit of supernatural action. The comedy's really good. I don't mind a good romantic comedy when it's got it. And it's got an interesting premise. I did read a bit more of the manga than I've seen of the anime so far, definitely, and I liked the manga just as fine. So, I mean, that's why I've been fine with this one. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I would once again recommend 300 points. You're going to make your characters a group of, well, you don't necessarily need to be girls, but you could be. But I would call it supernatural girls. Again, you don't necessarily need to have female characters, but I'm just suggesting that because you're going to be all situated around some kind of NPC. This is where the entire thing of the situation depends on your game master, of what kind of NPC they want to establish to help establish what kind of characters you have. But a supernatural group of characters, or at least tend to be supernatural group, that are revolving around this one NPC who you're going to kind of like, you're going to try to want to protect from any kind of outside threats, probably compete with each other, kind of go through some of the normal kind of life kind of things, because the NPC probably want to go to school, try to have a normal life, try to avoid a lot of the problems that are going on while all you're trying to compete for his affections, and also deal with each other and other supernatural things going on around them to come up with a basic adventure that should be pretty fun. And it'll all be about developing the relationships, mostly with the NPC, but possibly with each other, too, to a degree. You know, frenemies, a little bit. But let's move on and talk about a suggestion that one of you had out there. Thanks for the suggestions. I'll keep going with them as long as I have them. Black Clover. So Black Clover, as I said, was pretty much a manga. It's been a manga series, and an anime series has been announced, so hey, I'm getting the drop on it. But an anime OVA has been out. I've read some of Black Clover, but I have not seen the OVA yet. So that is a hint here that I'm going based on the manga more than anything here. So the anime might have a few changes, just to be warned. Because anime sometimes does do some changes between manga and anime. I've listed them before. But so when that anime comes out later in the year, make sure to check if you want to use that as your basis. But let's talk about the manga more than right now. So, it focuses on 2 characters, Asta and Yuno, who are both orphans that are sort of put into this church in the Clover Kingdom. Clover Kingdom is known for the fact that everyone pretty much has some kind of magical power to them, with the exception of Asta. He has no magical power. On the other hand, Yuna has overwhelming magical power and is almost a genius when it comes to manipulating it. As the two grow up, they end up competing for this position of power within the basically hierarchy of magic users, Wizard King. The reason this can happen, though, because Yuna has his overwhelming magical abilities, is because Asta develops this ability of an anti-magic. Basically, he gets powerful fighting abilities and martial prowess, and that combined with his anti-magic abilities makes him a formidable fighter too. And so the two of them sort of journey together in order to, through the kingdom, through attempting to up their ranks within it, and through developing the relationship with them and others, in order to achieve this rank of Wizard King, all while dealing with some threats that are to the kingdom from outside sources. Or possibly you could call some of them maybe inside. So there's certainly an action, battle scenes, fighting it out between some magic users, magic battles. It's an adventure. They tend to go on various things that are based around the fact that they're developing themselves and trying to develop themselves within the Empire, so they go traveling a lot. And of course, it's a fantasy. Magic powers. As soon as you call magic powers, I call it a fantasy. Now, I currently only rate this one 3. I do like it a lot, just for the bits of manga that I've read. I haven't read the entire thing, so there's the thing about that. I haven't caught up to it. I'm bad at manga. May I note, I'm much better at keeping in track with anime than I am with manga. That's an important thing for me to note right now. Because the one's much shorter. But, truthfully speaking, I do enjoy reading it when I get the chance to. And I've gotten through a big chunk of it. But, it hasn't been one of my favorites as of yet. Again, this might change when the anime comes out, because anime always has a different angle to everything. So we'll see for now, but I will only rate it a 3. Now, if you're using this as a BESM game, I recommend 500 points. We're going to keep it simple. Your characters are going to be people basically wanting to compete for the position of Wizard Kings. They're going to have a kind of relationship with each other. Depending on what your characters want to develop, they'll choose said relationship. But each of them is going to have, in their own respect, power and wish to become the Wizard King. They, of course, will do this by going through the various orders of knights, dealing with them, trying to up their prestige and get promotions within the basic society in order to develop themselves towards that higher level that would be the Wizard King. And all the while, they'll, of course, deal with things like threats from other kingdoms. They'll deal with things like the dungeon, and they'll deal with things like organizations that perhaps want the downfall of it, set all within this place, Clover Kingdom. And it will be up to them how much they compete with each other and how much they get along with each other. But they have this pre-existing relationship which should make it more difficult to compete against each other, but still that desire for the Wizard King should drive them to this point in time where they're always willing to sort of do that competition, that it's sort of like, if it gets down to the two of them maybe, drive it that, or the group of them, that they're going to drive it that we're the possible Wizard Kings. We're what the option is. Then we can see where we end up. Now let's move on for the last one for today. Magic Kaito 1412. We focus on Kaito, an average student for a knack for magic and a love of it, who kind of repeats the magical abilities, actual stage magic abilities that his father had, who died 8 years ago. He then learns out that his father was this international thief, Kaito Kid. He also learns that his father was murdered by this organization seeking the Pandora gem, said to be unable to unlock immortality. So Kaito takes up the mantle of Kaito Kid and basically becomes the next generation of it in order to go oppose this organization, to effectively, in a way, avenge his father, to bring this organization to justice, and to prevent them from finding this gem, which they still haven't managed to get. So this one is a comedy drama, I would call it. It has some kind of intense parts to it because of some of the nature of it, but it does have some very comedic points. And Kaito is a very interesting character, that he has this love of magic and showmanship, which even shows up when he becomes Kaito Kid. It's, of course, crime. He steals things. He's a thief. He always steals things in order to prevent the organization from getting it first, and basically to foil them. But it's also a manner of, showing them that you thought you murdered Kaito Kid. You didn't. I was just in hiding for 8 years. I'm back, and here I am. But it's also a gentleman thief anime. Of course, this is an interesting drama with such things as Lupin III, which I've talked about. Lupin III. But this is its own version of the gentleman thief sort of group, which is kind of established with some literature in the past, rather than anime in particular that it originated from. Now, I actually rate this one a 4. It's an interesting one, and it is, to be noted, a spin-off of Detective Conan. It really is, technically. But it was one that I enjoyed a lot. It's an interesting take on the same sort of premise. Rather than attempting to stop a crime or solve what happens after a crime, this is more thievery. So it's an interesting sort of thing. It takes it like sort of in between Detective Conan and Lupin the Third a little bit. I kind of find it somewhere in between there, and I find it very interesting. And he tends to sometimes meet Conan, both in some of his own series and some of Conan's series, and in some of the movies, where they tend to be at odds. Very interesting series that I do recommend. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I'd recommend 250 points. You're going to make your group a team of characters that are attempting to basically pull the legacy of a gentleman thief. One person in particular is, of course, going to be the face of whatever gentleman thief that you're going to have. Whether man or woman, of course, it does not matter in this case. It's the fact that it is the regal gentleman type of one that, doesn't kill anybody, announces themselves, takes the thing in successful and grand fashion. And the fact is, the rest of the team are going to be there to help assist along the way and to have their various roles in the thievery. The team itself will be working together to commit these various heists in truth to oppose the organization and to hopefully steal the Pandora gem before they would. That they would perhaps get it before they would. And each character having their own reasons for opposing this organization and their goals. And it will be up to the players to determine how they're going to determine that and why that they're part of this small group that's attempting this thievery in order to foil them. Basically, they're making the legend of this gentleman thief out in the open in order to stop them. Interesting take on a kind of anti-organization group there. So that's it for today, though. I introduced you to 4 more anime, I gave you a review on them, and I talked to you about how you could use them in a BESM game. The points you use, skill suggestions, other little suggestions about how you can adapt them. The truth is, you can use these in any role-playing game system you want. It's up to you to figure out how the game system will adapt. I've only helped you establish the basics for the setting that you're going to use, and how to adapt this anime to an interesting setting that would be good for role-playing. If you want to use a different system, go ahead, just take a look, figure out how to adapt it. There are plenty out there that some of these would definitely fit in amongst. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. Regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.